back to my channel. So we are hopping back on the wedding dress bandwagon, and we're going to start the third wedding dress out of this mini series. And this one's going to be a little bit different than I typically do. It's going to be a little bit more fitted. It's going to have a really long train, and it's also going to have like some drapey accents. It's going to be really pretty. And so for the fabric of this dress, we're going to be using this really pretty charmeuse satin. This is the same fabric as the lining that I used in the last dress, I'm pretty sure. And so we're going to need 7 yards of this about, and just so you guys know, I'm pretty sure that's the amount that you're going to need for this dress. I just bought a whole bunch of it because I knew I was going to use it a lot in this series. So I think that's about how it's been split up. So just 7 yards of this fabric. And for this dress, that is the only fabric we're going to need. We're going to also use it for our lining fabric. The only other thing is we're going to be using a bit of interfacing to give the bodice a little more structure. This is just a pretty thin iron-on interfacing that I use in a lot of my videos. So I would get about 1 yard of this, and I just buy this like in bulk whenever I get it because it's really good to have on hand. And so again, this is going to be a really inexpensive dress because I got this fabric from Fabric Wholesale Direct. It's like really cheap. It's really nice, and oftentimes you can also find coupons online if you search for them. And so this fabric was $2.99 a yard, and 7 yards of it is literally like $21. So for a wedding dress, that's kind of insane. And normally this is where I would say let's go cut out our pattern pieces, but I actually already did it last night. So let me show you what I cut out. So starting off per usual with the bodice pieces, these are going to be the front lining pieces of the bodice. So we have the center and side pieces, and we're also going to cut some of these out of our interfacing. And then this piece is the actual front piece, and this one is cut on the bias of the fabric, so that means the diagonals. So that's going to give this piece a little bit more stretch and give us a nicer drape across the front. Then next up here are the back pieces, and the outer layer and lining layer are the same for these ones, so we're just going to cut a bunch of these ones out. Again, also doing some with interfacing. And then these pieces here are the little like off the shoulder sleeves, and again these pieces are also cut on the bias, so just the diagonal of the fabric. And then these pieces here are the big skirt pieces. These shots are a little funny just because they are so dang long, but this is the front center skirt piece, and we're going to cut one of these on the fold. And when I originally cut out these skirt pieces, I forgot that they were going to need to have a curve across the front to fit into the corset style bodice. So I just added that in here, so just cut it following that curve. And then next up, these are the side skirt pieces. And I folded this piece in half so you can kind of see that the bottom of it goes at a slope. So the smallest part of the bottom is going to be the same length as our center piece, and then the longer end is going to be the same as the back pieces so that it can attach to either side. And so I'm just showing you here that when you open it up, it should just be a soft slope all the way down. And then this one here is the back piece, and I had to kind of fold it awkwardly because again, it was so long, but it is essentially just like the same shape as the last two, but we're going to have a curved edge on the back for the train. Now time for the sewing process. Just to get started, I already went ahead and fused my interfacing to those lining pieces. And so we're going to start by assembling the front bodice. So I'm taking that center piece, and we're going to be taking our 2 side pieces and sewing one down either edge of the front piece. And you could also cut some notches down the edge of the center piece to help it kind of fit around these curves better if you need to. And then we're just going to sew them right across. And now this is what the front lining pieces should look like. And to give this piece a little bit more structure, I'm going to be taking some thin boning that I got off of Amazon. I will link it in the description below. And I'm going to cut a piece that will fit down the seam that we just sewed, but it should be about 1 inch short so that we won't hit it when we sew our seams across the top and bottom. So I'm going to cut 2 of those out and round out the little bottom edges so they don't poke through our fabric. And then I'm just going to be top stitching those onto the back of these pieces, butting them up to the seam that we just did, but on the inner side of it, so it will actually be on the center pieces. And I just top stitched mine down either edge, but you could also use a zigzag stitch if you wanted to do it all in one go. Then we're going to take the front piece that we cut on the bias, and we're going to lay it over top of this piece, making sure that they are wrong sides together this time. And we're going to be pinning the bottom sections of these together to hold them flat. And then we're going to do the same thing to the top edges of these pieces. And now you're going to be left with a lot of extra fabric in the middle section, and you're going to want to play with all of this excess fabric, pinning it a bunch of different ways, trying it on and repinning it, because this is going to be all of the draping effects on the front, and sometimes it can take a while to get it looking exactly the way you want to. So just have fun with it, keep trying it different ways. And this is what mine ended up looking like. And so now I'm going to turn it facing the lining side, and we're going to trim any of the excess fabric to make it fit into the lining piece. And now we're going to move our pins so that they're only going through the top layer of our fabric. And we want to keep all of those pleats exactly the way that they were, but now we're going to baste them in place. And just as a reminder, basting stitch is the longest stitch length on your machine, and this is just going to hold our pleats in place without the pins. So now we can fully unpin these pieces and put them instead pretty side to pretty side now. And we're going to pin their top edges together, including the little armholes, and we're going to sew right across them. And now I'm just going to add some little notches around the neckline of the top to make it lay a little bit flatter when we turn these right side out. And then we can kind of repin these pieces exactly the way we had them before. And so I put these pins in between my little folds on the front to give the look that I want. So now I'm just kind of tacking them down so again we can remove the pins. And you want to put those stitches low enough so that when the draping is over top of it, you're not going to see them. And just to show you guys, this is what the bodice was looking like on me. So it does look different when you put it up against yourself versus when it is sitting flat. So you want to be trying it on a lot during this process. But now we can finally work on the back of the bodice, if Squid ever lets go of her grasp of my pieces. But for the back pieces, because we just cut 4 out of each of these, 2 of each of these are going to have interfacing on them, and the ones with interfacing are going to be our lining pieces. So we want to make sure that we're working with those pieces separately, but it's going to be the exact same process for both. So I'm just lining them up across these long edges and sewing them together. And then you can unfold them, and we're going to take one of the lining pieces and one of the top layer pieces. We're going to put them pretty side to pretty side, and we're going to again sew them across the top edge and the little armhole cutout. And then we can bring back in the front of the bodice, and we're going to open up one of these back pieces, and down the shorter edge we're going to line this up pretty side to pretty side with the side of the bodice, and we're going to pin them together. And then we're going to fold the lining piece of it back around so that both of the lining pieces are now pretty side to pretty side. So the side of the front is essentially just being sandwiched between the back piece, and we're going to do that down either side seam and then sew right across that straight edge. And it's also important to note that while I was sewing this dress, I was also zigzagging all of my raw edges so that it wouldn't fray so much, because satin does like to fray quite a bit. And now we can turn these pieces out, and we're going to have that finished edge like continuing all the way across. And then we can fold this piece in half and take off some of the back excess because mine was a little bit too long and I wanted to leave room for a lace-up back. And now to add the little loops for the lace-up, I'm just taking some ribbon that I have, and I'm going to be folding it into these little tiny loops and melting the raw edges together so that 1, they don't fray, and 2, so that the little edges of this loop will kind of stay together. And I think I made 20 of these so that I could have 10 loops down either side of my back, but you could do as many as you want. But once we had all of those little tabs all ready to go, you're going to want to mark out where you want them to go. So I decided to make mine 1 inch apart all the way down. And then we're just going to be pinning them to the pretty side of our outer fabric. But you want to make sure that the little loop side of them are in towards the bodice and that the raw edges are all lining up. And then once those are pinned where you want them, we're again going to fold over the back edge of the bodice so that these 2 edges are going to be pretty side to pretty side. And we're going to pin those all the way down and then just sew right across. And this part might feel a little bit funny just because of the way that we're assembling this bodice, but trust the process, make sure that they're pretty side to pretty side, and then just sew right across it. And then you can take out all of those pins and turn it right side out, and you should have all of these loops down either side of the back. And now for the fun part, when you can actually lace it up and try it on. And then to give the back a little bit more structure, we're again going to be adding some boning down those seams that we had just sewn. So I'm going to be turning that seam back out, and basically you want to put the boning right on the raw edge of this seam so that it's not actually going to be touching our seam, but that it is just right on that raw edge. Because when we turn this out, it's going to give us the structure that we need, but you're actually not going to see it at all. And so this one I just zigzagged in place and then turned right side out. And this is going to make it not like fold over when we lace up the back, but hold its shape and be nice and corset-like. And now it's finally time to start working on the sleeve pieces. And for these, I am just folding them in half and sewing across this little curved edge here. And again, I zigzagged that edge and added little notches all the way across it. And then you can go ahead and turn these pieces right side out. And I took mine to the iron to make them nice and crisp. And now across that little raw edge that we have left, I'm going to be adding 1 pleat to mine. And I decided to make my pleats going up. So I'm just going to be pinning those on either side and basting those in place. And I forgot to take mine to the iron now, but it would probably be the best time to like make sure that that pleat is nice and structured all the way across before you attach it to the bodice. And we're going to attach it to either side of the little armhole cutout. And I'm pinning mine with the little curved edge facing in towards the center of the bodice with the raw edges lining up on the top. And then I just top stitched that in place. And then I brought it around to the other side and did the same thing on the back, making sure not to twist these pieces in the process. And then when you fold those pieces down and over, you're not gonna see the raw edge at all, and it's going to just look like it's like tucked underneath the corset. And after that, the bodice is pretty much done, and so we can finally start working on these skirts. And so here I'm starting with the center skirt, and I'm going to be sewing one of the side skirts to it down either of the side seams. And we want to make sure that we're matching up the short side of the side skirts to the center piece. And then we're just going to stitch those all the way across. And then we can take our back skirt and we're going to pin it to one of the side skirts and then bring it around to the other side skirt and also pin it in place, and then sew those down again.
And now I'm just folding my skirt in half down the back and cutting a 9-inch slit so that we're going to have room for a zipper later, which I probably should have done before I sewed it on, but it's not a big deal. Just make sure you're going down the center of the back. And then we're going to turn our machine onto a basting stitch, and we're going to add 2 parallel basting stitches all across the waistband of the skirts. And then we can match up the center of the skirt to the center of the bodice, as well as both of the back edges, making sure to leave like an inch or 2 hanging off of the back edge so that we have room to add that zipper later. And then we're going to pull on 2 of the basting stitches on the same side of the fabric to gather up the skirt into this section that we have pinned out. And then we're going to evenly space out all of our ruffles and just pin this in place all the way across. And once that's all pinned and ready to go, we're going to sew all down that seam. And then we can take out all of those basting stitches. And again, I added a zigzag stitch all across this edge because, one, to help with the fraying, but it was also just very bulky, so this is going to help it lay a little bit flatter. And then down that little extra fabric that we left in the back of the skirt, we're going to add a little hem across it where it stops being attached to the bodice, and we're just going to sew that down so we don't have a raw edge there. And then I just added an invisible zipper down that little slit that we cut. And that's how we're going to close up the bodice and just finish this all off. And now the only thing left to do on this dress is just to add a hem all around the very long bottom of this skirt. It honestly took me so long to hem this whole skirt, but the results were definitely worth it. And without further ado, here is the finished dress. I think this dress turned out so elegant and pretty, and I'm really happy with how the drape turned out on the front. I was a little bit nervous going into it and first pinning it, but like I said, just trust the process because I think it turned out absolutely beautiful. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I really thought I was going to make this more of a fitted style dress, and I actually did try that out, but with the corset style on the front, it just looked weird to not have it be gathered and poofy. So I went back and redid it like this, and I think it was definitely the right choice. I think it's so beautiful, and I feel like this dress is just like the perfect in-between of like super girly and princessy, but still very elegant and refined. And you guys know I love a good off-the-shoulder moment, so I was very happy with how these sleeves turned out. If you guys decide to make this dress, as I always say, you can always send me pictures on Instagram. I love seeing your guys' creations. But as for this video, that was wedding dress number 3. So stay tuned because we only have one more left, and I will see you guys on wedding dress 4.